Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to have a quick chat with you all about Kevin McCarthy, and more specifically, the deal that he's brokered in order to get himself the votes he needs in order to become Speaker of the House. Now, at time of filming, he has not officially won the title, but this morning he did do very well in converting some of the people who were against him. I believe it was like 14 or 15 that he managed to drag over. So, when he says he's got the votes for this late night session they're going to run, I think he might actually have the votes to pull it off. I think his count might be right this time. So, let's talk about the deal that he had to strike in order to get those votes and how that might impact the operations of the House of Representatives in the upcoming Congress. To start off, let's discuss the hollow promises that McCarthy has made. I describe them as hollow because, while he's probably going to do the thing, it's not going to have the result that the members who are agreeing to this bargain expect that it will. And that is advancing specific legislative priorities. There's a whole bunch of them out there, from defense spending, anti-LGBTQ stuff, term limits, different niche priorities that are specific to these 20 or so holdouts that they really want to see voted on in this Congress. And this is an easy one for Kevin McCarthy to deliver because, yeah, he can give them the vote, but there's no guarantee that that's going to pass because other congressmen are going to have a say in it, and then it has to go to the Democratic-controlled Senate, and then if it made it through that, it would have to be signed by President Biden. So, yes, he can offer them a floor vote and say, sure, we'll bring that up. We can have that vote. And then he can wash his hands when it doesn't pass and say, oh, I did everything I could. But it turns out that your fellow congressmen and the other branches of government just decided that wasn't going to be law. So, that's a smart one on Kevin's part because, yes, he's going to force the debate to happen, but then he can make it go away because at the end of the day, the odds of any of it passing into law is pretty remote. So, chalk one up for McCarthy on that one. However, the more impactful concessions that Kevin McCarthy has made have to do with the rules that govern the House of Representatives, and specifically the procedures that allow a bill to come up for a vote on the floor. Now, some of these changes I think are actually good overall. For instance, having the full text of a bill available for 72 hours before a bill is voted on makes a lot of sense. People don't always have time to check in on the bill when it's being written up in committee, so just being able to access that final text before a vote, that's probably a good idea for the long-term health of the House of Representatives. Obviously, you'd need some kind of exception to the rule just in case, God forbid, there's an emergency and immediate action has to be taken, but I'm sure that'll be written, and that's a pretty obvious thing that needs to be in there. However, where I think the problem is going to lie is in the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is essentially a group of congressmen who decide when a bill can come up for a vote and the rules that will govern that vote and any amendments that might be added to the bill. And Kevin McCarthy has decided to give 3 of those seats to the most extreme members of his caucus, some of whom are the ones who've been voting against him for the last few days. And I think this is going to be a huge problem for him because he only can lose 2 seats off of the Rules Committee before a bill can't be brought to the floor under the current arrangement. And that could just very easily gum up the works in the process. We've seen that 20 people are more than happy to say, yeah, no, we don't like what you're doing, we're going to put a stop to this whole process over the course of just the speaker election. So here he is, handing the power to do the exact same thing to him whenever a tough bill comes up at any point in time. And this could be really impactful if it comes to something where the far right of the party really wants to see really tough spending cuts or a really extreme policy position that isn't going to be palatable to more moderate Republicans or the Democratic-controlled Senate or President Biden. And that really would just make the legislation impossible to move forward. But, even then, let's say that the Rules Committee allows things to move forward, the other major concession that he's made is that on a lot of major bills, there is the possibility for unlimited amendments. And the way it's currently being discussed, it essentially means that any member can come up and propose an amendment to the bill, and then that amendment, as long as it is deemed to be germane to the bill at hand, for instance, you couldn't, let's say, be doing a military spending bill and then say, oh yeah, here I want to insert money for food stamps. That wouldn't be germane to the bill at hand because obviously we're talking military spending, tanks, food stamps, not quite the same category. But as long as it's germane, the House would have to debate that amendment, vote on whether to include that amendment or not, and then resume debate on the bill in whatever state that it's in at the time. And unless there's a way to cut this off, and given the fact that there are those more extreme members in the Rules Committee, there may not be, a single member of the House of Representatives could essentially start a filibuster in the House by constantly proposing amendments, because as long as they're germane, under what McCarthy is proposing, they have to be taken up. And while, again, this amendment process sounds good, it feels like, yes, people should be able to come up and make amendments. If everyone was acting in good faith, it would be a good thing. But we've seen that a small group of very extreme actors are more than willing to go in and cause chaos and disrupt the entire legislative process because they're not happy with their specific, very unpopular policy goals not being advanced. And I think that, especially because, again, when McCarthy goes back to the first set of promises we talked about and puts up these votes for these extreme positions and then they don't go through, someone could say, hey, I didn't get my term limit thing. All right, now I'm going to jam this whole process up. This is going to grind to a halt. I'm putting in all of the amendments. And if he's not very careful, that really could end up screwing him over and causing himself a ton of headache as he just tries to force through especially important bills. Budgets, debt limit increases, things of that nature that must pass in order for the country to continue operating properly. But a lot of these very extreme conservative politicians want to make dramatic changes that are not popular with the American people and aren't palatable to their colleagues, let alone, again, the Democratic-controlled Senate and the Democratic president. So I think Kevin McCarthy right now is kind of procedurally set himself up in a way where he can't intervene in the process, and the people who are going to control the process are the people who don't have a problem with being incredibly disruptive and somewhat just blowing up the whole process just because they're not going to get their way. The last concession Kevin McCarthy made, I thought, was a really silly blunder because we already know how it's going to play out because it's not the first time that it's happened, and it's the return of the motion to vacate the chair. Now, I understand wanting to have that motion available. You know, the Speaker should be able to be held accountable by the members. However, having only one member be required to initiate the whole process is absolutely ludicrous. And some of the Republican representatives who are a bit more moderate said, well, the Democrats could weaponize this against you, but that's not what history tells us. John Boehner suffered under this when it was the Freedom Caucus who were attempting to do him in. The only reason he kept his job as the Speaker was because the Democrats voted to keep him in. So this isn't going to be abused by the Democrats. This is going to be abused by these same 20 people who are refusing to vote for him now whenever they don't get their way. They're going to be like, I didn't get whatever I wanted. I'm going to launch this vote. And because it's a privileged motion, it has to be taken up by the House immediately. So it's one of those things that it's going to be something that they can use to hang over his head and beat him with if Kevin doesn't do what they want him to do. There was a sensible way to do this, too, because it's a fairly common thing in parliamentary governments, called a vote of no confidence. Generally speaking, members of the governing majority will transmit a letter of no confidence, to use the example of the British Parliament. They'll send that to a committee, and once a majority of the majority has decided that they have no confidence in the Prime Minister, so to put that in terms of our House of Representatives and Kevin McCarthy's current majority, that would be if 112 representatives submitted a letter saying, I have no faith in Kevin McCarthy, that would trigger a vote to oust him from the leadership. However, that apparently makes too much sense and really makes so that there has to be a genuine reason that people would want to get rid of Kevin McCarthy. With just one member being required for this process to continue, any person can use this so long as they have a singular grievance against Kevin McCarthy, whether it's, again, a bill didn't go the way I wanted it to, I didn't get the position on whatever committee I wanted, I don't particularly like you today. God forbid. There are any number of reasons someone could launch this. Heck, they could launch it for no reason at all and just want to get some PR. And I think that that's going to prove, still not completely healthy. But again, it's one of those things that could really cause Kevin McCarthy trouble, especially, again, he's going to have tough bills he's going to have to bring to the floor. He's going to have to be working with the Democrats in the Senate and President Biden if he wants to actually have any legislation turn into law. And I think that we're just going to see a lot of trouble coming out of this particular rules change, just because it opens the door to so many people who definitely don't really care for Kevin McCarthy and would be more than happy to make his life miserable. Now, I'm sure there's also some more individual agreements that were made, perhaps regarding fundraising, campaigning, vague allusions to committee assignments, nothing specific, obviously. They've denied that pretty extensively, but there's always a little wink wink, nudge nudge, we'll take care of this when we take care of it. And for that stuff, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. It's a little hard to judge right now, things are very opaque, but once we see people slotted into the committees and what their intention is on those committees, I think we'll be able to judge a little bit more what Kevin McCarthy may have gotten himself into. But when it comes to the legislative priorities he's promised to advance and the rules changes he's made to help facilitate the people who want to advance those priorities, I think Kevin McCarthy has set himself up for failure. And we have two very wonderful recent historical examples in the speakership of John Boehner and Paul Ryan, both of whom had a very rough time trying to manage the Republican caucus with larger majorities, and both men ended up being so fed up with the caucus that they not only left the speaker's chair, but Republican politics entirely, at least when it comes to the House. So, good luck to Kevin McCarthy. I think he's going to need it. And as for how this is going to impact things going forward, buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a wild ride. Think about it. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever I post new videos. If you want to support me on my other social media platforms, all the links you need will be in the video description below. If you have any questions about this video or another topic that you'd like me to discuss, leave me a comment and I'll do my best to get you an answer. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.